Hey, how's it going, everybody? It's Josh with J&E Weather Chasers, and I was wanting to try this new thing where we do like an after chase review per se about storm chases we do. You know, a couple days after, a day after, I kind of just put a synopsis on how everything went, whether or not it was a bust or it wasn't. So we'll start with yesterday's, which was April 15th, 2024. It was a nocturnal event that was set in Nebraska, primarily in Nebraska and Kansas. There's two targets that day. It was either up along the low in Nebraska, the Kansas border, or you had a more isolated event in Kansas. Though you had two targets, both primarily nocturnal. Up in Nebraska was earlier, but for sure Southwest Kansas, where we targeted, was going to be a late convective initiation day, probably looking at between 7 to 10 p.m. So Emily and I talked about it. We discussed whether or not we wanted to go up there, wait that long, and then come back because we have to work in the morning. We decided on it anyways, and we went. we went. Our initial target was Kinsley, Kansas, which is just north of Greensburg, Kansas. And on the way up there, we actually stopped in Greensburg, and we were able to see the parks, the memorials that were set up in regards to the Greensburg, Kansas tornado on May 4th, 2007, which destroyed the town, unfortunately. It was the first EF5 under the new enhanced Vegeta scale. So it was a pretty surreal thing to see, as how many times we've been to Kansas. Me personally have never been to Greensburg, so it was pretty surreal to see. We ended up actually staying in Greensburg because Kinsley is just 30 minutes north, and we saw really no reason to go up there when there was both directions, east, west, north, south. So we're like, yeah, we'll just stay in Greensburg. Uh, Models kept hinting at a discrete storm popping up later that evening around 0203Z, so 9:10 p.m. And so we just stayed there. Later that evening, there was a queue developing as the energy was moving in from the low pressure system that was out west. Now, previously, days before, the system was hyped up because it looked good. It looked like a potential outbreak. But with the GFS being the GFS, it has a speed bias. So you always expect the storm system to slow down in the end, in which it did. So the timing of the low pressure system was not ideal, as the main wave wouldn't move in until later that night. But the environment that it was in, or that was in place during that night, was pretty volatile. So it was more of a take all or take nothing. You get a storm, there's a good chance that you're going to have tornadoes if the capping inversion can erode in time. So around 7:30 p.m., queues started developing, and it was more like set in the Oklahoma, Texas panhandle. And just seeing how the queue was acting, I was like, that's going to be it. If there's going to be a storm, that's going to be it. It's going to be set there. So we stayed in Greensburg to watch it because it was moving north northeast, and we were northeast of it. So we had really no reason to move at all. About an hour or so later, precip started developing. You could see returning off the Vance radar, Vance Air Force Base radar. So I'm like, okay, there's precip. This is definitely happening. The 0Z, I think it was a 0Z HER, printed it perfectly. It had it developing around 01Z, then deepening around 02, 03, then weakening around 04 as the air started to stabilize again. So we, from Greensburg, we moved west to Dodge City because we realized we were too far east compared to where the storm was moving, which was a north-northeast direction. We went west to Fork. It was either Ford. We went to Ford initially, then we just decided to go to the Flying J in Dodge City, where we met up with some friends and we talked for a few minutes, and it was good to see them. Then at that point in time, the storm was pretty mature, and it started strengthening really quick. And looking at the vertical wind profiles that were in place, it looked in the lower levels looked pretty spectacular for potential for tornadoes. So it started deepening, and we decided that from that point, we needed to go north. So we went towards Jetmore. From Jetmore, well, probably about halfway to Jetmore, we decided to pull off. And that is where we first encountered our first funnel of the storm. And it was in this old occlusion that was like right here. And it was kind of funny because we were looking at this new developing base over here. You have your old occlusion over here. And my friend Steven was like, what is that? And we looked up, and there was this funnel it was just there. It was just spinning right there. And we didn't even notice it because we were too hyper focused on this new base. So we noticed the funnel there, and the base, and we decided that it was time to move north because it started racing like 45 knots north northeast. So it's not moving fast, but it's not moving slow. So we decided to go north, and at that point, it occluded again and re-strengthened. And now we kind of fell behind because chaser convergence was really bad, but it kind of fell into place because when it re-strengthened, we had this. I wish I had photos of it. It was pretty spectacular. You had it was stars. You could see like the light from the moon being blocked by the clouds, but you could also see stars because it was partly cloudy. You had the updraft, and then you had a wall cloud under it with a funnel lowering. It was, if a tornado would have happened there, it probably would have been one of my best tornadoes, scenic tornadoes, even if it was nighttime, because it was still kind of lit because of the moon lighting. It was absolutely amazing. Unfortunately, that at that point in time as well, it was starting to move off to too far east, away from the dry line, where air was becoming more stable. And because of that, it started having issues with staying surface based, and you could really tell after it moved east of Jetmore, it went back elevated, and it was not able to. It started shrinking, and it did not look good. So in the end result, we called the chase around Haston. I think the town is called, east of Jetmore, and we went back home. We got home at 4:30 a.m. and I went to work at 6:30. So it was a splendid time, let me tell you. But for what the night was, would I call it a bust? No, because we did get a little bit of structure, and in the end result, I really wasn't expecting like too much because, like I said, it was a take all, take nothing kind of ordeal, and I didn't have high hopes in the end anyway, so I wouldn't call it a bust because it definitely got more than I thought. So, but yeah, that's how yesterday went, and thank you for tuning in. I appreciate it. If you just want to give us a like, if you come across this photo, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. Or video, sorry.